Hi, it's Rona again, the traveling quilter, and I'm back with week 3 of the Charming Spiral Quilt Along. Welcome back for another week of our Charming Spiral Quilt Along. And of course, if you haven't already, head over to ronatheribbeter.com. Link is below so you can get your pattern cover and fabric requirements so you can jump in and join right along with us. And this week, we're gonna do what I like to call the frame blocks. So that's these guys right here. And generally, it's pretty straightforward, basic piecing as well. However, this center piece right here, which is the 9 patch, it's a basic 9 patch, right? But there's a really cool way that you can put this 9 patch together that is super quick, super easy, and darn near perfect every single time. And that is pre-printed grids. So if you've never worked with this, there's 2 different kinds that I know of. There's Bosal that does one by the yard, and you can usually get these at your local quilt shops or online. And this one is by 10 Sisters. And this one, instead of doing it by the yard, these ones are in panels. So they're pre-cut and ready to use. They come to you ready to use. You just need to figure out how many panels you'll need to make your project, or you can cut them down to suit. So unfortunately, with this great panel that I have here, I can't use it because it's too small. This one is for a 1.5 inch finished quilt block, where these are 2 inches finished. So I had to set this lovely beauty aside and make my own. So what I did in order to make this is sheer weight, or the lightest weight possible, of the single-sided fusible interfacing. And you can get this at most of your quilt shops or the big box store, craft stores. They usually have it too. So what I did is I literally took this guy out on the roll, and I know that this grid right here, I need these blocks. You want to know your finished and your unfinished sizes. So my unfinished, or my cut size, is 2.5 by 2.5, because remember, we're using the pieces from our mini charm pack, right? So I know that I need these block pieces to be 2.5 by 2.5 so that my little mini charms will fit inside each one. And I know that I need 9 of them because it's a 9 block, right? 9 patch in the center. So all I did is 2.5 times 3 is 7.5 inches across and 7.5 inches down. The first thing we're going to need is our square ruler and rotary cutter and drawing pencil, and of course our interfacing. And again, we're using sheer weight. So I'm going to spread it out here real quick. Now I'm going to place my square ruler over top at 7.5 by 7.5 inches. So I want to find the 7.5 on the ruler and make sure that my first draw has plenty of room. So we're just going to line it up here and then draw on the top, making sure it's 7.5. And you want to make sure that you're drawing on the glue side of your interfacing. So draw the top side here and then the side. Okay. And then you can see I've got top and side. So now I'm going to just trim off this excess and set that aside because we won't need it till later. So now I'm going to turn this around and I'm going to line up that 7.5 by 7.5. Again, I'm going to line it up on those lines on the ruler. I'm going to line it up with the lines on the interfacing. And then once I have it lined up here, 7.5 by 7.5, then we're going to go ahead and draw again on the top and the right side, our two open sides. So basically, we're completing the square. And the interfacing is going to try and move around on you, so make sure you put lots of pressure on there. Okay, see, now we can see our finished square. So now our block pieces are 2.5 inches. So I want to measure 2.5 inches in and line that up with one side of my drawn square. So I'll line that up and then draw that 2.5 inch line. And then do it again. So we'll essentially create 3 columns, if you will, that are 2.5 inches wide. Then I'm going to turn this on the side and do the exact same thing. Measure the 2.5 inches, find that line, line it up with my side, and draw another 2.5 inch line. And then finally, same thing, to another 2.5 inches in. If I can actually get it lined up correctly. There we go. And draw our final line. So now, after this line, we have our 9-patch grid. So now that we have our 9-patch grid square here all cut out and marked up the size that I need it, now I need to choose which fabrics I want to go where. And in this block, I did the background fabric on the side here and then these 4 squares. But I think for this next one, I think I'm gonna flip that. So for this one, I'm gonna have 5 of the background-ish fabrics and then 4 of the colors. So the side ones, I know I want to do lilac. So basically it'll go like this. I want to do lilac on that side there. And then, which means that these corner pieces will be background as well. So I've got 4 of those. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So I'm going to put that with these guys. And then for my grid square, I've got 5 of the background-ish because I'd gone through all of my mini charm packs and separated them into colorways. And even though they're not the same fabric line, they match, they go together. So they're not exact, but they're close enough so they'll work. Everything will come out beautifully, I hope. All right, so the next step in our little project here, our process, is we need to place all of our squares onto our grid in the order that they're going to go. So I'm going to place this guy. Do not tell me I'm losing another one. There we go. I'm going to place this guy right here in the center. It's kind of stripey and fun, right? And then I'm going to place the purple ones. Maybe we'll do top and bottom. And again, I'm just putting these inside that green square. I hope you can see this okay, because I can't, I'm down a camera right now, so the angles, we're gonna have to play around with that. And then I'm gonna add my corners. And one tip that I can give you for this too, is when you're placing these, do it on your pressing mat. That way when you pick them up, you don't have to worry about them flying all over the place. And make sure also when you're doing this that you want the sticky side of your interfacing facing up, because we definitely do not want to be gluing that to your pressing mat. We want to glue this to the back side or the wrong side of your fabric pieces. Okay, so we're placing this right there. There. So now we have, and I'm going to try and tip this up so you can see it. We have the grid together. I'm not going to pull it all the way up because the pieces will go flying. So now what we need to do, now that they're all in their little grid squares, again, as it falls off, So now I'm going to take this over to my pressing mat here, and I'm just going to give this a quick press. When you're pressing this, you're going to press it according to the instructions on your interfacing packet. And it's really basically, don't hold the iron down too long because you don't want the interfacing to burn, and you want to do from the fabric side. You do not want to flip this over because this interfacing is so thin that it could burn easily. So you definitely want to do, your fabric should be on the top side, and then just place your iron down, hold it for a second or two, move it over, and it's important to actually press these with your iron. You do not want to slide this around because your interfacing is so thin that it could tear. And you definitely, since these are not stitched together, you don't want them sliding around. You want them to be glued exactly where they are. And so I'm going to press this, and then I will show you why. Just a second. Now I can hold it up. Now you can see we've got it all pressed together. So now your interfacing is on the back and your pieces are on the front. Now, obviously, we're gonna need to stitch these together. So the cool thing about this is all you have to do, we're gonna start on this seam right here. So literally, you just fold it right sides together and stitch down your seam. Same 1/4 inch stitch, just right down the edge like you would normally. Oh, that means my bobbin's low. We're gonna play the bobbin game. Okay, looky there, I won. There's still bobbin in there. So we did our thing. Look at that. Now we have one done. Now we got to do this seam. So we're going to do the exact same thing. Flip it forward and stitch. And I'm going to play the bobbin game. Do you think I can get one more out of this? There. Now we have 1 and 2. So now, obviously, the next step is going to be, we got to stitch across this way, right, to make our 9 patch. But you'll notice if you just straight do this, it goes a little wonky because you can see how the fold on this side it's folding in the same direction, and you can't open those seams because, well, this is a fold, right? So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to snip this, but I'm going to snip it right where that seam line is, and I'm only going to snip it just on the end. I do not want to go across this seam line. I just want to come up to that seam line. So I'll show you what I mean. You can see I just snipped, but I did not cross my seam, right? Because we just stitched that. We definitely don't want it to unravel. But the reason I did that is now when I fold this down, I can fold this side this way and the back side this way. So now your seams are nested together. Does that make sense? So now, just like before, I don't need to pin anything. I don't need to stitch anything. Sorry. We definitely need to stitch something, but I don't need to pin it in place because the interfacing is what's holding it in place. So now I'm just going to, once again, oh, should we play the bobbin game? I'm looking in there. All right. Here we go. We're playing the bobbin game. I think I can get one more seam. We're gonna try this. If I fail, I've got backups ready to go. So, fingers crossed. Here we go. won the bobbin game. Okay, I'm not going to risk it. I think I'm going to go ahead and change out my bobbin before I do this last one. So bear with me just a second. I will be right back. And I'm back with a fresh new bobbin. Okay, so where were we? Oh yes, so we just stitched this line here, and now we can open it up, and you can see that it is nice and beautiful. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same thing with this top. I'm going to fold them in opposite directions, if you can see that. So they're nested together, and I'm going to stitch right across the top. And there we go. Our block is now finished. Well, that's not true. Our 9 patch is now finished. 9 patch, there we go. And then again, you're going to, well, I am going to, same thing that we did before, right in the center, you're just going to snip and snip right in the center so that we can fold them out and spin our seams. Now, when you do this, you want to be really careful because you definitely don't want to cross your seams, right? I'm going to need heavier scissors for this. Heavier scissors. Whoop. There we go. I'm just snipping the end here. I'm not going across my seam. So now we can press them in opposite directions. And you'll see this a little bit better when I press it with the iron. So I'm going to do that again to this one. Bloop, bloop, and bloop. There we go. Okay. So inside out, outside in. Ta-da! All right, let me press this real quick so you can see it a little easier. Now you can see the back is pressed in our opposite directions. Ta-da! And our front looks like that. So now all we have to do is trim off this excess around the outside and then put our frame together. So for the frame pieces, this one's pretty simple and pretty straightforward. But whenever you're doing frames, here's a tip. I just trimmed this, and you'll notice that there's a little bit around the edges still of this interfacing, and that's because my whole thing needs to be 6.5 by 6.5, which when I lined up my ruler, I literally just cut around it. So now I know that this is exactly 6.5 by 6.5. Now, in order to do our frames, now I know that this is exactly 6.5 because, like I said, I just trimmed it with this. But a good thing to do when you're doing frames, your 1/4 inch seam allowance becomes very important, because if it is off, or if one thing is longer than the other, especially when you have pieces that are stitched together on the inside of your frame, you want to make sure that this edge and the edge of your piece is exactly aligned, and you want to make sure that this outer edge is exactly straight. Otherwise, this corner, when you stitch your pieces together, can get really wonky, and that's where you get your bubbles and things when it's finally put together. And especially if you have a long arm or you have somebody that long arms for you, they will appreciate you taking the extra time to make sure that those wobbles are not in there, because it can misalign a lot of things when you go to quilt your quilt sandwich together. So I know that this piece I cut at 6.5 inches using the exact same ruler as I did this one, because let's be honest, some of them can be a little off. So I want to take this piece and this piece right sides together, just like I'm going to stitch them. And I want to make sure that they are exactly the right length across, and that when I put them together, they're straight down the edge. So for this, I want to make sure that when I stitch them, that they stay exactly there. So I'm going to line this up, move these guys out of the way. And then I'm going to stitch, just same thing, 1/4 inch right down that outside. Now, there is a trick that I use. I call it the ruler test. And the ruler test is how I know if my seam is straight or not. And that is literally to place your ruler on top of your square and see, whoop, if that 1/4 inch is exact or not. Now, if you're doing it correctly, that stitch line should be right on top of, or right underneath that first 1/4 inch line. And I'm not sure how this is showing up on camera. I will have to look at it later to find out. But I can promise you, it's pretty smack on. Okay, so now we're going to do the exact same thing with this other side right here. So we're just going to line it up and make sure our edges are right on, and we're going to stitch away. That's okay. That is okay. All right, so now that we have these guys, I'm going to press them out. So literally just press them out, just like that. Okay, so there we go. Now we've got them pressed out. So now we're going to do the top. And again, you want to make sure that these guys are exactly the same 6.5 inches. And 6.5 inches with that seam allowance in there, because now you're going to be attaching your end pieces. So you want to make sure that this 1/4 inch seam here matches this 1/4 inch seam here. And same thing on the other side. So I'm going to take these guys, one on each end, just like that, and stitch 1/4 inch and 1/4 inch. Normally when I'm putting these together, I chain piece them so it goes a lot quicker. So it's not a start, stop, start, stop. I'm doing a whole bunch of them at a time. Especially because this week we have quite a few of these little guys to make. I think it's a total of 21 of these blocks this week. There's quite a few. So, and it's, the quilt is supposed to be scrappy, so play around with your fabrics. Again, I'd love to see how your blocks are coming along, and which colors you're using and in which order, and are you doing them all the same? Are you flipping them around? I would love to see what you guys are doing. Now I want to make sure that these line up. Again, the goal is to make sure that these seams line up perfectly, right? And because fabric is fabric, there is a little bit of give that you can do. Like you can kind of manipulate, you know, if this one lines up, but this one is just a little bit off. Yeah, see, even to the best of my ability, this one is still just a little bit off. It's like a hair off. But I can stretch it just a little bit in order to make it fit. But be warned that you don't want to stretch it too much, because if you stitch it, just because you can stretch one of the fabrics in order to make it fit, to make these seams right here line up, doesn't mean that you should, because if you have to stretch it too far, then you're going to cause that wave again. So it's going to be really tight here, but then the outside of your block is going to be really wavy, and that's when you'll start to get those ends puckering out like this, and that's what we don't want. So we want to make sure that these two seams match up as close as possible. Now I'm going to press these guys in so that the seams go in towards the center. Okay, so now we have them. Ooh, that's warm. Now we have these guys together. So I'm going to place these right sides together and line up the edges. And again, you want to get them so that they're nested really nicely into the seams. And I do this the same way that I did in last week's video, where I line it up and I pull up the edge and I slowly roll it back just to make sure that it's nice and nested. And you'll be able to feel it when those seams are nested. So I'm going to put a pin there. And then this side is, like I said, this side is just a hair too short. So I'm going to stretch it just a touch. But again, you don't want to stretch it too much. And it's okay for our seams to be a little imperfect now and then. It's okay. It's okay. Nobody's going to notice but you unless you tell them. And I would much rather have a seam that was imperfect rather than the alternative, which is, you know, this to be wavy and wobbly. We definitely, that's worse. Trust me. Okay, so now we're just gonna, got these pinned and nested, and we're gonna stitch right down the side. There we go. We'll see how we did. I think I did pretty good. What do you think? So now all we have to do is duplicate this on the bottom, press them out, and our blocks look like this. That's it for the frame blocks. Thanks for sticking with me, and I will see you next week for week 4.